All right, good evening. It is time for another reading in Trust Me, I'm Lying. And this is it. We're done with the book after this. We've got one more chapter in the conclusion. Um, Nothing more to say about it. Let's just jump in. We're on chapter 21, How to Read a Blog, an update on account of all the lies. Um, there is one quote. Um, Truth is like a lizard. It leaves its tail in your fingers and runs away, knowing full well that it will grow a new one in a twinkling. Uh, that is the that is Ivan Turgenev to Leo Tolstoy. Tolstoy. I don't know why I had trouble with that name. Um, okay. When you see a blog begin with, according to a tipster, know that the tipster was someone like me tricking the blogger into writing what I wanted. When you see we're hearing reports, know that reports could mean anything from random mentions on Twitter to message board posts or worse. When you see leaked or official documents, know that that really means someone just emailed a blogger and that the documents are almost certainly not official and are probably fake or fabricated for the purpose of making desired information public. When you see breaking or we'll have more details on the story as the story develops, know that what you're reading reached you too soon. There are no there was no wait and see, no attempt at confirmation, no internal debate over whether the importance of the story necessitated abandoning caution. The protocol is going to press early, publishing before the basic facts are confirmed, and not caring whether it causes problems for people. When you see updated on a story or article, know that no one actually bothered to rework the story in light of the new facts. They just copied and pasted some shit at the bottom of the article. When you see sources tell us, know that these sources are not vetted. They are rarely corroborated and they are desperate for attention. When you see someone call themselves a best selling author, know that they probably mean their self published book was number one in a tiny category on Amazon for 5 minutes, and the same goes for every top ranked podcast and award winning website. When you see a story tagged exclusive, know that it means the blog and the source worked out an arrangement that included favorable coverage. Know that in many cases the sources gave this exclusive to multiple sites at the same time, or that the site is just taking ownership of a story they stole from a lesser known site. When you see said in a press release, know that it probably wasn't even actually a release the company paid to officially put out over the wire. They just spammed a bunch of blogs and journalists via email. When you see, according to a report by, know that the writer summarizing this report from another outlet has but the most basic ability in reading comprehension, little time to spend doing it, and every incentive to simplify and exaggerate. When you see we've reached out to so and so for comment, know that the blogger sent an email 2 minutes before hitting publish at 4 a.m., long after they'd written the story and closed their mind, making absolutely no effort to get to the truth before passing it off to you as the news. When you see an attributed quote or a said so and so, know that the blogger didn't actually talk to that person, but probably just stole the quote from somewhere else. And per the rules of the link economy, they can claim it as their own so long as there is a tiny link in the original to the original buried in the post somewhere. When you see which means or meaning that or will result in or any other kind of interpretation or analysis, know that the blogger who did it likely has absolutely zero training or expertise in the field they're opining about, nor did they have the time or motivation to learn, nor do they mind being wildly, wildly off the mark because there aren't any consequences. When you hear a friend say in conversation, I was reading that, Know that today the sad fact is that they probably just glanced at something on a blog. Okay. Um, Relying on abandoned shells. The process for finding, creating, and consuming information has fundamentally changed with the advent of the web and the rise of blogging. However, the standards for what constitutes news are different. The vigor with which such information is vetted is different. The tone with which this news is conveyed is different, and the longevity of its value is different. Yet, almost without exception, the words we use to describe the news and the importance readers place on them remain the same. In a world of no context and no standard, the connotations of the past retain their power, even if those things are fractions of what they once were. Blogs, to paraphrase Kierkegaard, left everything standing but cunningly emptied them of significance. Words like developing, exclusive, and sources are incongruent with our long held assumptions about what they mean and what's behind them. Bloggers use these substance words, quote unquote, like Wikipedia's weasel words, to give status to their flimsy stories. They use the language of Woodward and Bernstein, but apply it to a media world that would make even Hearst queasy. They give us what George W. S. Trow called abandoned shells. Why does this matter? We've been taught to believe what we read, that where there is smoke, there must be fire, and that if someone takes the time to write down and publish something, they believe in what they are saying. The wisdom behind those beliefs is no longer true. Yet the public marches on, armed with rules of thumb that make them targets for manipulation rather than protection. I have taken advantage of that naivete, and I am not even the worst of the bunch. I'm no different from everyone else. I too am constantly tricked by bloggers, by publishers, by politicians, and by marketers. I'm even tricked by my own monstrous creations. The age of no authorities. And so fictions pass as realities. Everyone is selling and conning, and we hardly even know it. Our emotions are being triggered by simulations, unintentional or deliberate misinterpretations of cues we've been taught were important. We read some story and it feels important, believing that the news is real and the principles of reporting took place, but it's not. Picture a movie poster for an independent film that wants to be received as artistic and deep. It probably features the laurel leaves icon for awards like Best Picture, Critics' Choice, or Official Selection. These markers originally symbolized a handful of important film festivals. Then it became important for every city, even neighborhoods inside cities, to have their own film festival. There are also the significant differences in the winners and the few dozen or even hundreds of selections. The use of the festival laurels is to conjure up the implicit value associated with scarcity for the viewer, despite the enormous gap between the connotation and the reality. The laurel leaf illusion is a metaphor for the web. It underpins everything from the link economy. A link looks like a citation, yet it is not, to headlines that bait our clicks. It's why trading up the chain works, and it's the reason why you could get your name in the press tomorrow through Haro, Haro. What these people are trying to do is to find any stamp of approval or signal of credibility. Blogs have a few minutes to write their posts, few sources, and little support, but because of the one-off problem, they need to be heard over thousands of other sites. They desperately need something that says, this is not like those other things, even though it is. So they make up differentiators and misuse old ones. Oh, we're in an ad. Well, alrighty then. At least some people are seeing an ad. Okay, I guess we're back. All right. So I'm just going to reread that last little bit because I don't know where you went into the ad. What these people are trying to do is to find any stamp of approval or signal of credibility. Blogs have a few minutes to write their posts, few sources, and little support. But because of the one-off problem, they need to be heard over thousands of other sites. They desperately need something that says this is not like those other things, even though it is. So they make up differentiators and misuse old ones. In the age of no authority, wrote Trow, there are these are the authorities. We uh, we live in a media world that desperately needs context and authority, but can't find any because we destroyed the old markers and haven't created reliable new ones. As a result, we couch new things in old terms that are really just husks of what they once were. Skepticism will never be enough to combat this, not even enough to be a starting point. It is now almost cliche for people to say, if the news is important, it will find me. This belief itself relies on abandoned shells. You're not. Oh, in an ad? Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Some people see it, some people don't. Whether they're right. There was an ad, but it only showed up on in for some people. I don't know. This belief all itself relies on abandoned shells. It depends on the assumption that the important news will break through the noise while the trivial will be lost. It could not be more wrong. As I discovered in my media manipulations, the information that finds us online, what spreads, is the worst kind. It raised itself above the din not through its value, importance, or accuracy, but through the opposite, through slickness, titillation, and polarity. I made a lot of money and had a great time playing with the words that make up the news. I exploited the laziness behind the news and people's reading habits. And from the abuse of abandoned shells came another one. Our knowledge and understanding is the final empty, hollow shell. What we think we know turns out to be based on nothing, or worse than nothing, misdirection and embellishment. Our facts aren't facts, they are opinions dressed up like facts. Our opinions aren't opinions, they are emotions that feel like opinions. Our information isn't information, it's just hastily assembled symbols. There is no way that that is a good thing, no matter how much I gained from it personally. And that is actually the end of that chapter. It was very short, so we have nothing left but the conclusion. So let's jump into that. Conclusion. So where to from here? The narrator of Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men, a brilliant, powerful media manipulator, says that his story, quote, is the story of a man who lived in the world, and to him the world looked one way for a long time, and then it looked another and very different way. The change did not happen all at once. Many things happened, and that man did not know when he had any responsibility for them and when he did not. End quote. In a way, that is also my story. I saw the world one way, and then I saw it another way, and it led to this book. And then years later, I see it a slightly different way again. Where does my responsibility begin and end? What guilt do I share? How fair was I to the people I implicated? These are questions that can't be answered but should be asked. I remember when I was finishing this book for the first time, I felt like I had to get it out as soon as possible. I was afraid that the year or so it had taken me to write it had been too long, that if the book didn't get out soon, it would be too late. I'd miss my window and no one would hear me. It's strange now to have looked at the pages once again and seen that, if anything, I was early. Things were bad then, but they were going to get much worse. Things had to get much worse before people would really listen. They might not fully listen now, today, but now ordinary people are primed to understand how bad things are. They've seen the consequences of the current system firsthand. They are inclined to believe, finally, that something is very wrong. If only they could have seen it years ago. For instance, the quote I am about to give you, it feels very current, but in fact it's from early 2011. Quote, fake news. I don't mean fake news in the Fox News sense. I mean the fake news that clogs up some newspapers and most news websites, for that matter. The new initiative will go nowhere. The new policy isn't new at all. The product isn't revolutionary. And journalists pretend that these official statements and company press releases actually constitute news. Fake news, manufactured, hyped, rehashed, retracted, until at the end of the week you know no more than at the beginning. You really might as well wait for a weekly like The Economist to tell you what the net position is at the end of the week. End quote. The extra irony there is that the person who said it is Nick Denton, the founder of Gawker Media, one of the people I've spent a good portion of this book railing against. In an interview with the Atlantic magazine, Denton claimed he was on a jihad inside Gawker against fake news. In the years since, it's something that's become rather common. Journalists complaining about fake news. I find that to be a little like Kim Kardashian complaining about how fake reality TV shows are. Not that there is any question about a media jihad. As I have shown in this book, there is one, only it is a war with you against you. It's me against them, against you. My proxy, by proxy, we fight countless battles for your attention, and we'll go to any length to get it. And yet, even as Denton was saying that, and I was writing about it, almost no one knew that another year was going. Another war was going on, a secret war to hold media like Gawker legally accountable for its actions. More than 25 years ago, in Amusing Ourselves to Death, Neil Postman argued that the needs of television, then our culture's chief mode of communicating ideas, had come to determine the very culture it was supposed to represent. The particular way that television stages the world, he wrote, becomes the model for how the world itself is to be staged. Entertainment powered television, and so everything that television touched, from war to politics to art, would inevitably be turned into entertainment. TV had to create a fake world to fit its needs, and we, the audience, watched that fake world on TV, imitated it, and it became the new reality in which we lived. The dominant cultural medium, Postman understood, determines culture itself. Well, television is no longer the main stage of culture. The internet is. Blogs are. YouTube is. Twitter is. And their demands can and their demands control our culture exactly as television once did. Only the internet worships a different god, traffic. It lives and dies by clicks because that's what drives ad revenue and influence. The central question for the internet is not, is this entertaining, but will this get attention? Will it spread? We've seen the economics behind the spread of news online. It's not a pretty picture. Although if it were, it'd be a slideshow. Rather than turn the world into entertainment, these forces reduce it to conflict, controversy, and crap. Blogs have no choice but to turn the world against itself for a few more page views, turning you against the world so you'll read them. They produce a web of mis, dis, and un information so complete that few people, even the system's purveyors, are able to tell fact from fiction, rumor from reality. This is what makes it possible for manipulators like me to make our living. I came across a line that put my feelings well. Quote, one cannot feel more helpless than in a place and time when slander settles everything. End quote. So that's how I felt during this book, helpless. Help and hope. In 2012, it didn't look like anyone was going to do anything about it. I deliberately ended this book then without much in the way of solutions, because I didn't think there were any. Apparently, I was not as creative or intelligent as the billionaire Peter Thiel, few are, who was at that point quietly funding a legal battle against Gawker. In 2007, the site had outed him as gay against his wishes, and after speaking to many other victims of Gawker's publishing philosophy, he decided to put him out of business. The secret war culminated in a $100+ million verdict in 2016 that put Gawker Media into bankruptcy and eventually led to Gawker being shuttered. The sister sites were sold off. Their crime? They had published clips from an illegally recorded sex tape of Hulk Hogan. Despite repeated opportunities to remove it, to settle, and to apologize, the site refused. It was their undoing. To think the site whose editor once justified his unfair reporting to one of my clients as just professional wrestling, quote unquote, was destroyed by a professional wrestler who refused to buy that excuse. Journalists and First Amendment supporters decried the ruling, arguing that it would have a chilling effect. We should be so lucky, is what I say. Journalists should think twice before publishing a sex tape that arrives to their offices in an unmarked envelope. Journalists should do actual research before running stories. Gawker would have clearly seen that Hogan had said many times that the tape was recorded without his consent. The public does not have the right to know every single thing people do in their private bedrooms. There is such a thing as the line in civilized society. We used to believe this. We didn't always submit to the rule of an abusive media system, as though those who control it were in charge and not us or our laws. In other countries, libel and defamation laws require a conspicuous retraction, quote unquote, by the publisher of the claim if the claim is proven. A lame update at the bottom of a blog wouldn't cut it there and shouldn't cut it anymore anywhere. Colonial newspapers at various points in British history were required to post a security bond in order to enter the publishing business. It was intended to secure payments in the event of a libel action and to ensure some responsibility by the press. It gave the public and the state some recourse against publishers who often had few assets to pay for the damage they could potentially inflict. In 1890, future Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandis published an article titled "The Right to Privacy" for the Harvard Law Review, which argued that the advent of photography and the proliferation of national and international newspapers required better legal protections for average citizens. It wasn't fair, essentially, that technology allowed lies to damage reputations faster than the truth could fix them. So there is precedent for these types of protections, which blogs show us we desperately need once again. We have simply forgotten about them. I think we've noticed since the Gawker ruling that there has been a kind of chilling effect on the media. Perhaps publishers have learned that actions have consequences, that freedom of speech is not necessarily freedom from responsibility, that there is difference between aggressive reporting and recklessness and bullying. Hopefully, this lawsuit, if only in a small way, has changed the incentives of the media system and proves that an individual can have an impact on how things work. Other solutions. I wish there were I wish there was an easy solution to all of this. It would help me answer my critics and the defensive bloggers who will invariably whine, well, what are we supposed to do about it? Or, okay, wise guy, tell us how to fix it. Well, I don't know the answer. My job was to prove that something was massively, massively wrong and to come clean about my role in it. To prove that we've all been feeding the monster. What exactly to do about it will be the work of those who come after me. If I saw bright spots or green sprouts, I would have pointed them out. If there were solutions, I would give them to you, but currently I don't see any. In fact, I object to using the word solution at all. To seek a solution implies and confirms that this problem needs to even exist. It takes for granted the bad assumptions at the root of blogs, assumptions that are deeply mistaken. Take the frantic chase for page views, for example. This wrongly assumes that the traffic blogs generate is worth anything. It isn't. Sites sell only a fraction of their inventory each month, essentially giving the rest away for fractions of a penny, yet they attempt to grow their traffic above all else. When I wrote the conclusion the first time, the trend was for sites to auto refresh as a way to generate extra page views. More recently, the trend has been something called infinite scroll, which has the same effect. Free page views. The advertisers who paid for those impressions were robbed, and the blogs that charged for them are no more than crooks. Meanwhile, smaller sites that have built core audiences on trust and loyalty sell out their ad space months in advance. They have less total inventory, but they sell all of theirs at higher prices and are more profitable, sustainable businesses. Blogs scramble for a few thousand extra page views and manipulate their readers to do so because they value the wrong metrics and the wrong revenue stream. They follow short term and short sighted incentives. But incentives can be changed, just as the New York Times showed in switching from the one off to a subscription model under Adolf Ox. In order to survive as a quality publication, the New York Times is redefining its economics once again. The recent implementation of their controversial paywall, which limited readers first to 20 free articles a month and then to 10 before requiring them to pay for more access, is a lesson in great incentives. According to economist Tyler Cohen, it means that the quote the new New York Times incentive is to have more than 20 must-read articles each month, end quote. The Wall Street Journal and other publications have harder paywalls. And guess what? Subscriptions are increasing. How absurd that under the current model, the one that most publishers are sticking with and believe in, there is no imperative to produce these must-read articles, only must-clicks. The New York Times recently announced they once again make more total revenue from subscriptions than from advertising. A deep-pocketed donor just agreed to subsidize on $1 million worth of New York Times subscriptions for students. This is all very good news. Whether it will be replicated or whether it can be is another question. Would you pay for most of the crap that is created online? I wouldn't. As Ed Wallace, the Business Week writer, reminds us, quote, the first job of the journalist is to ask, is this information true? End quote. Bloggers refuse to accept this mantle. Instead of getting us the truth, they focus on one thing, and one thing only, getting their publishers page reviews. I don't care that finding the truth can be expensive, that iterative news is faster, or that it's too hard not to play the page view game. Find another business if you don't like it, because your profession's true purpose is to serve the best interests of your readers. Doing anything else is to misread your own long-term interests. Advertisers pay you to get to readers, so screwing the readers is a bad idea. Readers hold equally exhausting assumptions of their own. The current system of delegated trust and deferred responsibility exists because readers have tacitly accepted sorry, lost my place there. Tacitly accepted the burden that blogs have abdicated. We've assumed it was our duty to sort through the muck and garbage to find the occasional gem, to do their fact checking for them, to correct their mistakes, and call ourselves contributors, but when actually we're cogs. We never ask the critical question, if we have to do all the work, what are we paying you guys for? When intelligent people read, they ask themselves a simple question. What do I plan to do with this information? Most readers have abandoned even pretending to consider this. I imagine it's because they're afraid of the answer. There isn't a thing we can do with it. There is no practical purpose in our lives for most of what blogs produce other than distraction. When readers decide to start demanding quality over quantity, the economics of internet content will change. Manipulation and marketing will immediately become more difficult. My decision to spend less time online is not a selfish one, though it did make my life better. It's voting with my wallet. If more people do the same, it will have impact. I also won't deny that marketers, myself foremost among them, are part of the problem too. Nobody forced me to do what I did. I was a bad actor and I created many of the loopholes I now criticize. Both I and my clients profited greatly from the manipulations I confessed here. Millions of books were sold, celebrity was created, and brands were reinvigorated and built. But we also paid very heavily for those gains with currency like dignity, respect, and trust. Deep down, I suspect that the losses may not have been worth the cost. Marketers need to understand this. American Apparel is no longer in business. The strategies I talked about in this book were good for notoriety, but ultimately mattered very little in the long term. Don't forget that, especially the young people reading this book, the type I hear from who come up to me and say it inspired them to get into marketing. I'm flattered and horrified. I want to remind them that if you chase the kind of attention I chased and use the tactics I have used, there will be blowback. Consider that seriously. A new awareness. We must rid ourselves of the false beliefs that caused so much of this. Publicity does not come easily, profits do not come easily, and knowledge does not come easily. The delusion that they could was what fed the monster most heartily. It is what propelled us past so many of the warning signs that this was simply not working. You cannot have your news instantly and have it done well. You cannot have your news reduced to 140 characters or less without losing large parts of it. You cannot manipulate the news but not expect it to be manipulated against you. You cannot have your news for free. You can only obscure the costs. If, as a culture, we can learn this lesson, and if we can learn to love the hard work, we will save ourselves much trouble and collateral damage. We must remember there is no easy way. To borrow from Bud Schulberg's description of a media manipulator in his classic novel, The Harder They Fall, too many of us, whether we're in media or marketing, or just sharing stories on our social accounts, are indulging, quote, in the illusions that we can deal in filth without becoming the thing we touch, end quote. The current system cannot stand without these faulty assumptions. My contribution was to expose the problem because once seen for its contradictions and selfishness, it begins to fall apart. What is known can't jerk us around unwittingly. Before anything can be resolved, the implicit must be made into the explicit. This may seem simplistic, but I have repeatedly used the metaphor of a feedback loop or arms race in this book. A company hires an online hitman like me, and so their rival does too. A blog tricks their readers with an exaggerated story, and their next post must deceive their skeptical audience more boldly. Opting out of this cycle, choosing not to feed the monster, is not some thankless favor I am asking for. It has massive and immediate implications for the rest of the chain. Every new invention brings new problems with it. This is true for every medium and every communication method in history. For instance, only in the last 1,000 years of Latin were spaces inserted between words, a direct result of the spreading of books and scrolls that drowned people in so much text that they couldn't read. Blogs have created their own problems. We too are drowning in information that bleeds together into an endless blur. Someone has to stand up and say the emperor has no clothes. The words have no spaces between them. And God damn it, that's ridiculous, because only after the problem is identified and the new ideal articulated can creative solutions be found. Part of writing this book was about a controlled burn of the plays and scams I have created and used along with the best of them. They have become constant dangers to me and the people I care about, to culture itself in some ways. I only I not only want to render the tricks useless by exposing how they work, but I want to opt out of doing them myself. I want to force everyone else to opt out as well. Hopefully, clearing this ominous pile of debris will make it easier to start fresh. Of course, I know some of you might ignore that part and use this book as an instruction manual. So be it. You will come to regret that choice, just as I have, but you will also have fun, and it could make you rich. To those of you whom I have burned in this book, whom I have hurt or taken aim at or criticized or made fun of, I'm sorry. Trust me, I'm lying when I say that. It's just that you deserve better, and the second you stop and walk away, the monster will start to wither and you will be happy again. Whether you decide to use this book for good or evil, whether you listen to all my advice or just the parts you want to hear, well, that's on you. The end. That's it. All the rest of that is notes and um, acknowledgments and the index. So yeah, that was an interesting read. Informative, I suppose, depending on your perspective. I don't think I have it in me to be a media manipulator. Some people might, but not me. So, that's it. That is our 201st reading. And the next one is going to be Plato. I have already consulted with the person that asked me to read it, and that's what I'm going to do. In fact, I've already decided. There are 2 of the 5 dialogues I'm going to start with, and we'll see how long that takes me to get through. And that's all I'm going to read of Plato for now, and then I will get on. I'll read something else and then come back to read something else, maybe the Republic or something later. But anyway, that is it. And I will. Well, let's see. Is there anybody around? No, I'm not gonna raid tonight. I will just see you all in the next one. Have a good night.
Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. Just tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing in my ears. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations.